Have you ever noticed how some people become more powerful the exact moment everyone else starts falling apart? While others panic, argue, and desperately chase validation like they're starving for it, these people seem to operate from a completely different reality. They don't react, they don't explain, and they absolutely don't chase. But somehow everyone else starts orbiting around them like they have some invisible magnetic pull. It's not magic. It's what happens when you weaponize spiritual awakening. Most people think awakening makes you weak, passive, some kind of spiritual pushover who gets walked all over. They're not just wrong, they're completely backwards. Real awakening, the kind Carl Jung actually documented, doesn't make you a doormat. It makes you absolutely untouchable. Here's what really happens when you awaken correctly. While everyone else is having emotional breakdowns, you become strategically detached. While they're desperately seeking approval like it's oxygen, you stop needing it, and suddenly everyone is competing for your attention. While they're explaining and defending every little thing, you simply act from unshakable inner authority. Carl Jung called this individuation, but let's be real about what it actually means. You stop being controlled by other people's chaos, and that makes you the most powerful person in any room. Think about it. Who actually has influence? The person constantly trying to convince everyone they're right, or the person who's so centered they don't need to convince anyone of anything? The person begging for respect, or the person whose very presence commands it without saying a word? Jung discovered that true spiritual awakening isn't about becoming some weak, love and light person. It's about becoming completely sovereign. And sovereignty, that's pure power without the struggle. If you're exhausted from being everyone's emotional support system and want to flip the dynamic so people start seeking your energy instead of draining it, stay right here. Most people never even glimpse this level. Cross this threshold, and you'll never give your power away the old way again. But here's what nobody tells you about real spiritual awakening, and why most people who call themselves spiritual are actually the most pathetic people in any room. You know exactly who I'm talking about. The co-worker who lets everyone dump extra work on them because it's all love. The friend who loans money to the same deadbeat over and over because we shouldn't judge. The person getting cheated on who stays because relationships require sacrifice. These people have turned spirituality into a license to be walked all over. They'll smile while their boss screams at them because anger is just hurt. They'll let their kids disrespect them because children are our teachers. They'll stay in toxic relationships because everyone deserves compassion. And the worst part, they're proud of it. They actually believe their doormat behavior makes them enlightened. They think being everyone's emotional dumpster is spiritual growth. They've convinced themselves that having zero boundaries is somehow divine. Here's what's really sick about this. We've been programmed to think this way. 50 years ago, parents commanded respect in their households. Teachers had authority in their classrooms. People understood hierarchy, boundaries, and that respect had to be earned. But now, we've been sold this toxic idea that everyone's opinion matters equally, that every feeling is valid, that setting boundaries makes you mean. Parents apologize to their toddlers. Teachers beg students to pay attention, and they call this progress. Meanwhile, everyone around these doormat spiritual people is laughing behind their back. And Jung saw through this pathetic performance immediately. He understood that real spiritual people aren't the ones getting walked over. They're the ones nobody dares to disrespect in the first place. Look at who actually has power in your life right now. Your most successful friends, your most respected colleagues, the people everyone actually listens to. Are they the ones constantly talking about love and light? Hell no. They're the ones who say no without explaining why. They're the ones who don't respond to every text immediately. They're the ones who charge what they're worth and don't apologize for it. These people aren't spiritual because they read Buddha quotes on Instagram. They're spiritually mature because they understand something most people never will. Respect isn't given to nice people, it's given to powerful people. And here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. Real spiritual awakening doesn't make you nicer. It makes you scarier. Not scary in a threatening way. Scary in a this person can't be controlled way. When someone tries to guilt you, it doesn't work. When someone tries to manipulate you with their emotions, you don't bite. When someone tries to make their emergency your problem, you just don't. And that terrifies weak people, because they can't figure out how to get their hooks in you. They can't find your buttons to push. They can't make you dance to their drama. This is what Jung called individuation, but let's call it what it really is: becoming immune to other people's bullshit. Look at the most powerful leaders in human history, the ones who shaped civilizations not through force, but through sheer presence. Marcus Aurelius didn't conquer through brutality. He ruled through philosophical mastery that made him untouchable. His meditations reveal a man so spiritually integrated that no external circumstance could disturb his inner authority. Gandhi didn't defeat the British Empire through violence. He accessed a level of spiritual power so profound that an entire colonial system collapsed before his unshakable presence. His detachment made him more dangerous to the establishment than any army. These weren't nice spiritual people. They were sovereign, spiritual warriors. And Jung spent decades studying two types of patients: those who succeeded in life and those who remained stuck. And he discovered something the spiritual establishment doesn't want you to know. The patients who integrated their spiritual awakening became magnetic leaders. But the patients who used spirituality to avoid their power remained perpetual victims. The difference wasn't their meditation practice or their philosophical knowledge. The difference was their relationship to their own authority. Successful patients learned to wield their spiritual insights as tools of influence. Unsuccessful patients used spiritual concepts as shields against responsibility. Here's what Jung observed about real spiritual power. The more detached someone becomes from needing outcomes, the more they control outcomes. Think about it. Who has more influence in a negotiation? The person desperately trying to close the deal, or the person who's genuinely willing to walk away? And tell me, who commands more respect in a relationship? The person begging for love, or the person who's complete within themselves? And who do you think gets promoted faster? The employee who needs the job, or the employee who performs excellently while remaining internally free? See how detachment isn't indifference. It's strategic positioning. When you stop needing something, you gain power over it. When you stop fearing loss, you become magnetic to gain. And when you stop defending your position becomes unassailable. Walk into any boardroom and you can spot the truly powerful person immediately. They're not the loudest. They're not the most aggressive. They're not performing competence or demanding attention. They're the one everyone unconsciously defers to. They speak and others listen. They suggest and others implement. They remain calm while others panic. And somehow their calmness spreads through the entire room. This isn't charisma. This is sovereignty. They've accessed what Jung called individuation, complete psychological independence from external validation. They don't need the room's approval, so the room gives them its authority. The person who says no without explanation, and everyone accepts it. Spiritually integrated. The person whose very presence shifts the energy of a space, operating from the frequency of someone who has done the inner work. But here's where most spiritual seekers go wrong. They confuse spiritual bypassing with spiritual mastery. They think awakening means becoming harmless instead of becoming powerful. They mistake being accommodating for being evolved. Real spiritual development includes your darkness, not just your light. The spiritual person who claims they don't get angry is a liar or a time bomb. The one who says they love everyone equally has never learned to set boundaries. The one who's always positive is afraid of their own authentic reactions. Jung understood that integrated people aren't nice, they're whole. They can access their anger when boundaries are crossed. They can deploy their selfishness when their needs matter. They can use their manipulative abilities for strategic purposes. They can be cruel when cruelty serves a higher purpose. This isn't evil. This is completeness. And completeness is magnetic. People sense when they're in the presence of someone who owns all of themselves, and they unconsciously submit to that level of authentic authority. So if you want to access genuine spiritual power, the kind that makes others orbit around you, the kind that commands respect without demanding it, the kind that influences outcomes without forcing them, you need to understand Jung's most dangerous discovery. The discovery that spiritual establishments have tried to suppress because it threatens their control over spiritual seekers. The discovery reveals why some awakened people become untouchable leaders, while others remain perpetual victims. Jung discovered that real spiritual awakening isn't about transcending your humanity. It's about integrating your totality, including the parts of yourself you've been taught to fear. And once you integrate those parts, once you own your complete psychological spectrum, you don't just become spiritually awakened. You become spiritually dangerous, in the best possible way. But Jung discovered something that made the spiritual establishment so uncomfortable, they tried to suppress his work entirely. Something that reveals why most awakened people remain powerless their entire lives, while a select few become absolutely magnetic. Jung discovered that your greatest power lies buried in your shadow, not your light, not your positive qualities, not your spiritual virtues. Your power is locked away in everything you've been taught to deny about yourself. But here's what Jung observed that no one wanted to hear. Every spiritual tradition, every religious system, every personal development philosophy was teaching people to amputate half of themselves. Don't be angry. Don't be selfish. Don't be manipulative. Don't be cruel. Don't be greedy. Don't be vengeful. But Jung asked the dangerous question: what happens to those qualities? Do they just disappear? The answer terrified everyone. No. They go underground. They become your shadow. And from the shadow, they control you completely. The shadow doesn't disappear when you suppress it. It becomes your master. Jung studied hundreds of patients over decades, and he noticed a pattern that changed psychology forever. The patients who tried to be only good became the most manipulative. The patients who denied their anger became passive-aggressive destroyers. The patients who suppressed their selfishness became martyrs who controlled through guilt. The patients who rejected their power drives became secret tyrants. But the patients who owned their darkness, they became luminous. Not because they acted out their shadow impulses, but because they integrated them consciously. They stopped being controlled by what they refused to acknowledge. It's just like that. When you completely integrate all parts of yourself, including the parts you've been taught to hide or deny, something powerful happens. You stop leaking energy through internal conflict. You stop being at war with yourself. You stop projecting your unowned darkness onto other people. They became complete, and completeness is magnetic. And it's so important. It's not even about becoming a better person. It's about becoming a real person. Think about it. Most people are walking around as fragments of themselves. They've disowned their anger, so they become passive-aggressive. They've rejected their selfishness, so they become martyrs who secretly resent everyone. They've denied their power, so they become victims who blame everyone else. But when you integrate your shadow, when you own your capacity for selfishness, anger, manipulation, and power, you stop being controlled by these forces unconsciously. You can choose when to be selfish and when to be generous. You can choose when to use your power and when to step back. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole, not just good. And when you're whole, people can feel it. They sense you're not hiding anything. They know you're not pretending to be something you're not. They recognize you've integrated parts of yourself they're still running from. That's magnetic. That's power. That's what makes people orbit around you instead of you chasing them. But Jung wasn't advocating for becoming a psychopath. There's a crucial difference between shadow integration and destructive behavior, between owning your darkness and being owned by it. Psychopaths are controlled by their shadow. They act out unconsciously. They're slaves to their impulses. Integrated people control their shadow. They choose consciously. They're masters of their impulses. The difference is awareness. When you integrate your capacity for anger, you can deploy it strategically when boundaries are crossed, but you're not reactive. When you own your manipulative abilities, you can influence outcomes skillfully, but you're not compulsive. When you embrace your selfishness, you can prioritize your needs effectively, but you're not cruel. This is what Jung meant by holding the tension of opposites. You become capable of anything, but you choose consciously what serves your highest good and the highest good of all. And Jung developed a process for reclaiming your power from the shadow. First, identify what you most judge in others. Whatever triggers your strongest reactions reveals your disowned qualities. Do you hate manipulative people? You've suppressed your own strategic thinking. Do you despise arrogant people? You've rejected your own legitimate pride. Do you judge selfish people? You've abandoned your own needs. Do you resent controlling people? You've disowned your own power drives. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Second, recognize how you express these qualities unconsciously. You think you're not manipulative, but you use guilt to get your way. You think you're not arrogant, but you judge everyone who isn't as conscious as you. You think you're not selfish, but you expect others to sacrifice for your spiritual journey. You think you're not controlling, but you withdraw love when people don't meet your expectations. Behavior 5, self-sacrifice. They called you dependable, solid, unshakable. The guy who always shows up, the one who never complains, the one who holds it down. And for a while, you wore that like armor. You picked up the slack, stayed late, paid the bill, handled the crisis. You gave and gave because that's what real men do, right? You don't ask, you provide. You don't cry, you fix, you don't break. You hold it all together. But here's what no one saw. While everyone leaned on you, you had no one to lean on. You were drained, empty, depleted, but still showing up like a machine. You stopped sharing what you needed, stopped asking for help, stopped expecting anything back. Because deep down, you'd learned that needing less made you stronger. Carl Jung would call this a fracture in the self, because when you suppress too many pieces of who you are in service of others, you don't become more noble, you become hollow. And then resentment creeps in. You smile, but your chest tightens. You help, but secretly hope someone will finally ask, "Are you okay?" They never do. Because you trained them not to. Every time you ignored your own exhaustion to stay useful, you taught the world to treat your energy like it was endless. Here's the thing. This didn't start with your partner, or your boss, or your friends. It started the first time you believed love was earned through being needed. So you kept earning it, with silence, with sacrifice, with service. You thought being good would protect you. Instead, it turned you into a ghost with good manners. And it never ends in a big moment. It ends in tiny, invisible ways. You stop asking what you want for dinner. You say, "I'm fine," when you're screaming inside. You numb out with work, distraction, or silence. Not because you don't care anymore, but because caring started to cost you everything. You want to know what real strength looks like. It's not giving everything away. It's knowing where you end and others begin. It's honoring your capacity, not bleeding for applause. It's having the courage to say, "I'm done carrying what isn't mine." Because the truth is, the world will never tell you to stop sacrificing. You have to decide that for yourself. Next, we hit the most painful behavior of all, the one that turns your soul into currency. All for the chance to feel like you belong somewhere. Behavior 6. Accepting abuse for belonging. You stayed, not because it felt good, not because you were blind, but because walking away felt worse than being mistreated. You made excuses. They're under a lot of stress. They just don't know how to show it. It's not that bad. I've been through worse. You told yourself loyalty meant endurance, that love was supposed to be hard, that sacrifice proved you were committed. But deep down, you weren't staying out of love. You were staying because you were terrified of being alone. That's what makes this pattern so lethal. It looks like devotion, but it's survival. Carl Jung talked about it without flinching. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. And if your worth was tied to performance growing up, if love always came with conditions, if silence felt safer than honesty, then you were wired early to tolerate pain if it meant staying included. So you tolerated it. The criticism, the dismissiveness, the subtle jabs that never stopped, the blame shifting, the threats, the punishment masked as feedback, the need to walk on eggshells just to keep the connection alive. And maybe you thought that made you strong. But here's what actually happened. You disappeared. You became who they needed, not who you are. You shrunk your truth, muted your intuition, rebuilt yourself around their moods. And every time you compromised a part of yourself for the sake of peace, you taught your nervous system that being chosen is more important than being whole. And here's the twist that hits hardest. It wasn't just them doing it to you. You were doing it to yourself. Every time you stayed quiet when you needed to speak. Every time you absorbed blame that wasn't yours. Every time you minimized your own pain to make someone else feel better. You weren't just tolerating abuse. You were accepting it as your place. But let me be clear. The moment staying connected requires betraying yourself. It's not connection. It's captivity. You don't have to earn love by suffering. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who benefit from your silence. You don't have to beg to belong. Because if someone only values you when you're small, they don't value you. They value your submission. And now that you see it, you have a choice. You can keep making yourself smaller for their comfort, or you can step the hell out of the performance. Because the next realization flips everything. The truth that most people never get to. Because it's easier to blame others than face this one cold, sharp reality. You're not just tolerating these behaviors, you've been repeating them. Here's the part no one wants to admit. You're not just the one who was hurt, you've also become the one who hurts. Not out loud, not with fists or screaming matches, but in quiet, unconscious ways, just like the people who trained you. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The parts of you you've rejected, disowned, buried. The resentment you said you didn't have. The rage you said you'd never express. The control you said you hated in others, but now use in your own subtle way. And here's the thing. The longer you tolerate abusive dynamics, the more you internalize them, then project them. You gaslight yourself. It's not a big deal, I'm overreacting. And then you gaslight others. Why are you so sensitive? You mock yourself. Guess I'm just a screw-up again. And then you mock others. Relax, it's a joke. You shut down when others hurt you. And then you punish people with silence when you're hurt. You hated how they did it. Now you do it too. But because your nervous system is running on code it didn't write, the very things you swore you'd never become, they crept in the back door while you were surviving. This is the moment most people bail, because blaming others is comfortable. But taking responsibility for how you now move through the world, that's where transformation actually starts. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is that crossroads. You can keep replaying the script. You can keep handing out pain the way it was handed to you, quietly, unconsciously, with a smile. Or you can break the damn cycle, not with guilt, not with rage, but with awareness. The moment you see the pattern, it's yours to rewrite. This isn't about being perfect. This is about being honest. You were hurt, and you adapted. But now those adaptations are hurting other people, and hurting you all over again. This is your moment to stop performing strength and start building integrity. Because without shadow work, there is no real healing. There's just self-deception dressed up as emotional maturity. And that brings us to what Jung really offered. Not advice, but a system, a way to reclaim your mind, reclaim your power, and rebuild your identity from the inside out. Let's talk about individuation and how to stop bleeding energy into everyone else's expectations. Now you see it. Not just the people who drained you, but the ways you've handed them the siphon, the patterns, the betrayals, the masks you've worn so long they almost felt like you. So what now? How do you stop bleeding energy into fake peace, toxic dynamics, and people who only see what you give, not who you are? Carl Jung had an answer, and it wasn't stay positive. It wasn't forgive and forget. It wasn't cut everyone off and go live in the woods. It was individuation. Individuation isn't some mystical buzzword. It's the psychological process of becoming your actual self, not the version of you that survived or the one everyone liked. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming yourself, piece by piece. And it starts with this. 1. Awareness over amnesia. Stop pretending you didn't see the pattern. Stop justifying behavior that feels off. Stop calling your exhaustion normal. If it drains you, warps you, silences you, it matters. Call it what it is. That's manipulation. That's self-betrayal. That's fear running the show. Clarity is power. If you don't name it, you can't shift it. 2. Boundaries over performance. A boundary isn't a wall. It's a declaration of what you will no longer abandon yourself for. You don't need to yell. You don't need to explain for hours. You need one honest sentence. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that kind of conversation. If that happens again, I won't stay. People will flinch, some will leave. Let them. Boundaries don't push away love. They filter out harm. 3. Integration over image. You want your power back? Then stop performing your best self. Start integrating your real self. That includes your anger, your desires, your shame, not to act them out, but to own them. You're not whole because you're calm. You're whole when you can hold your own contradictions without crumbling. Jung didn't say, be good. He said, I'd rather be whole than good. This is what energy mastery actually looks like. Not control, not charisma, containment. You stop leaking energy into proving yourself, into explaining your pain, into managing the reactions of people who refuse to meet you. You keep what's yours. You speak when it matters. And when something doesn't honor you, you walk away, not in anger, in alignment. This is how Daniel did it. This is how you do it. Not all at once, but one pattern at a time, one no at a time. One breath where you don't abandon yourself at a time. This is your power, not given, reclaimed, the line you draw, the vow you make, the moment you finally say, I'm done tolerating what shrinks me. So now you've drawn the line. You've said it. I refuse to be shrunk. But here's the truth. That's just the beginning. Because the moment you stop tolerating disrespect, you become dangerous. Not to others, but to the systems that benefited from your silence. People will test your boundaries. They'll throw guilt, confusion, silence, charm, whatever worked before. Not because they're evil, but because you just broke a pattern they depended on. So you need something stronger than raw emotion. You need strategy. Jung discovered that the most powerful individuals in history weren't those who withdrew from the world, but those who learned to move through it without being moved by it. They could play the game without being played by the game. They could participate in the illusion while never forgetting it was an illusion. Think about your own life for a second. Have you ever noticed how some people can walk into any room and somehow everyone starts behaving better? They're not lecturing anyone. They're not being preachy. But but their presence alone shifts the entire energy. That's conscious participation in action. This is strategic authenticity at its highest level. You're not trying to wake everyone up. That's spiritual narcissism disguised as service. You're not trying to fix broken systems. That's codependence disguised as leadership. You're simply refusing to let unconscious environments contaminate your conscious state. But how do I stay authentic while dealing with people who are completely unconscious? Great question. Jung studied patients who mastered this art, and he found they shared 3 specific capabilities. First, they developed what he called the observer self. They could watch themselves participating in various social roles without identifying completely with any of them. It's like being an actor who knows they're playing a character, not becoming the character. You can engage in office politics without being consumed by office politics. You can participate in family dynamics without being controlled by family dynamics. Second, they learned strategic authenticity. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this sounds manipulative, hear me out. They knew how much truth to reveal and when. They could be genuine without being foolishly transparent. They understood that not every environment can handle your full authentic expression, and that's not a limitation. It's intelligence. Think about it this way. Do you share the same level of personal information with your boss as you do with your best friend? Of course not. That's not being fake. That's being intelligent about context and appropriateness. Third, they mastered influence without attachment. This one's crucial. They could guide outcomes without being emotionally invested in whether people followed their guidance. They planted seeds without needing to control how those seeds grew. They offered their truth without needing others to accept it. And here's where it gets interesting. The less attached you are to changing others, the more others naturally change around you. Have you experienced this? When you stop trying to convince someone of something, they suddenly become more open to hearing it. That's not coincidence, that's psychology. Jung observed that conscious participants develop what he called soft power, influence that operates through presence rather than pressure. When you're not trying to convince anyone of anything, your authentic state becomes naturally convincing. When you're not defending your position becomes inherently defensible. But what about when people are being completely unreasonable or toxic? Another excellent question. Here's where it gets sophisticated. Conscious participation means you can engage with unconscious behavior without becoming unconscious yourself. You can have compassion for people's dysfunction without enabling it. You can love people's potential without being frustrated by their resistance to growth. This requires a completely different understanding of love and service. Most people think love means trying to wake others up or fix their problems, but conscious love means holding space for people's journey while maintaining boundaries around your own energy. It means seeing their highest possibility without needing them to embody it on your timeline. Jung realized that conscious participants serve a specific function in the collective unconscious. They become what he called frequency holders, stable reference points of higher consciousness that others can unconsciously attune to. They're not preaching or teaching. They're simply embodying a different way of being human. Have you ever been around someone who just makes you want to be better? Not because they're telling you to be better, but because their presence somehow elevates your own behavior. That's frequency holding. This is subtle work. Most of the time, people won't even consciously notice what you're doing, but unconsciously, they sense they're in the presence of someone who's not controlled by the usual fears, needs, and reactive patterns. And that presence alone begins to shift the field around you. The ultimate test of conscious participation is this. Can you love humanity completely, including its unconsciousness, without losing yourself in that unconsciousness? Can you maintain compassion for people's limitations without being limited by their limitations? Can you stay connected to the human experience without being controlled by human conditioning? This is what Jung meant when he talked about individuation leading to service. Once you've reclaimed your authentic power, you don't use it to separate yourself from the world. You use it to engage more skillfully with the world. You become someone who can hold space for transformation without forcing transformation. But here's the thing. Conscious participation isn't a one-time achievement. It's a daily practice that requires constant recalibration, because the world will test your commitment to consciousness every single day. And how you handle those tests determines whether you maintain your power or give it away. That's the final mastery we need to explore. Here's what Jung discovered that most people never realize. Getting power is actually the easy part, but keeping it? That's where 99% of people fail spectacularly. You've probably seen this yourself. Someone goes through a spiritual awakening, integrates their shadow, develops some sovereignty, and then, 6 months later, they're back to their old patterns. What happened? It's because they fell into what Jung called the power corruption trap. Not the obvious kind where people become tyrants, but the subtle kind, where awakened individuals start using their consciousness as just another ego strategy. Jung studied this phenomenon obsessively because he watched it destroy so many of his patients. They'd do the work, gain authentic power, and then immediately start weaponizing their awakening against others. They'd become spiritual narcissists who looked down on unconscious people. They'd use their psychological insights to manipulate situations. They'd turn their sovereignty into superiority. But wait, you might be thinking, isn't the whole point to become more powerful than other people? No. And that's exactly the trap Jung warned about. Real power isn't about being better than others. It's about being free from the need to be better than others. The moment you start using your awakening to feel superior, you've lost the awakening entirely. You've just created a more sophisticated ego structure. Jung identified 3 sustainable power principles that separate authentic leaders from spiritual narcissists. First principle: power through service, not domination. Here's the paradox Jung discovered. The more you use your power to serve something greater than yourself, the more powerful you become. But the moment you start hoarding power for personal comfort, it begins to evaporate. Think about the most influential people you know. Are they the ones who are constantly trying to prove their superiority? Or are they the ones who use their capabilities to contribute something meaningful? The difference is obvious once you see it. But doesn't that just make me a doormat again? Great question. No, because service from sovereignty is completely different from service from codependence. When you serve from codependence, you're trying to earn love and approval. When you serve from sovereignty, you're expressing your authentic power through contribution. Second principle: continuous growth over static achievement. Jung realized that the moment you think you've arrived spiritually, you start declining. Power requires constant evolution. The most dangerous phrase in consciousness work is "I've got it figured out." Why? Because the world keeps changing, relationships keep evolving, and new challenges keep arising. The sovereignty that worked in your 20s might not work in your 40s. The boundaries that served you as a single person might need adjustment when you're in partnership. So I can never just relax and enjoy my progress. Of course, you can celebrate your growth. But the moment you stop growing, you start stagnating. And stagnation kills power faster than almost anything else. Third principle: responsibility without attachment. This is Jung's most sophisticated insight. True power comes with responsibility, not because you have to accept it, but because you're naturally called to it. When you develop authentic sovereignty, people start looking to you for guidance, stability, and leadership. But here's the trap. If you get attached to being needed, you lose your power. If you start deriving your identity from being the wise one, the strong one, the awakened one, you're back in ego territory. The mastery is holding responsibility lightly. You serve when called, you lead when needed, but you're not attached to the role. You can step back when appropriate without feeling like you're losing your identity. Have you noticed how the most powerful people seem almost reluctant to use their power? That's because they understand that real authority comes from not needing to be in authority. Jung also identified the daily practices that maintain authentic power over time. These aren't complicated techniques, but they require consistency. Morning sovereignty check-in. Before you engage with the world, you connect with your center. You ask yourself, what's my authentic state right now? What do I need to maintain my frequency today? This isn't about positive thinking, it's about conscious awareness of your starting point. Energy audits throughout the day. You periodically check, am I operating from sovereignty or from ego? Am I responding consciously or reacting automatically? Am I giving my power away or investing it wisely? Evening integration practice. You review the day not to judge yourself, but to learn. Where did I maintain my center? Where did I lose it? What patterns am I still working with? What's my consciousness teaching me? Weekly relationship and energy reviews. You assess your connections and commitments. Which relationships are supporting my growth? Which ones are draining my energy? What boundaries need adjustment? Where am I over-giving or under-receiving? But Jung's ultimate test for sustainable power was this. Can you maintain your sovereignty when everyone wants to take it from you? Can you stay centered when others are trying to make you reactive? Can you remain authentic when there's pressure to perform? Because here's what Jung understood. The world will test your commitment to consciousness constantly. Family members will try to guilt you back into old roles. Colleagues will attempt to drag you into office drama. Society will reward you for conforming and punish you for being real. So, how do I handle all that pressure without becoming isolated? Jung's answer was profound. You can love completely without losing yourself completely. You can be present for someone's pain without taking responsibility for their healing. You can offer support without sacrificing your peace. You can hold space for growth without trying to control the process. This is what Jung called the compassionate warrior path. Fierce love that includes boundaries, authentic connection that maintains independence, service that strengthens rather than depletes you. And when you master this level of conscious engagement with unconscious systems, something remarkable happens. You don't just maintain your power, you become a catalyst for others to find theirs. Your refusal to participate in unconscious patterns gives others permission to wake up. Your commitment to sovereignty inspires others to reclaim their authentic authority. You complete the circle that began with your own awakening. You become fully yourself while remaining fully connected to the human experience. This is Jung's vision of what's possible when someone fully integrates their psychological development with their spiritual evolution. This is the life you were born to live, the life of someone who has remembered who they are and refuses to forget, no matter how much the world asks them to. This is Jung's ultimate message. Change yourself completely, and you change everything. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. You now have something most people will never understand. The real blueprint for authentic power that Jung discovered through decades of working with people who actually transformed their lives. This isn't a theory anymore. You know how to reclaim your power from your shadow. You understand how to become psychologically sovereign. You've learned to manage your energy like the precious resource it is. And most importantly, you know how to stay conscious in an unconscious world. But here's the thing, and Jung would be the first to tell you this. Knowing all of this means absolutely nothing if you don't live it. I've seen too many people get excited about this kind of information, feel inspired for a week, and then go right back to their old patterns. Don't be that person. The next time someone tries to guilt trip you into abandoning your boundaries, are you going to cave? Or are you going to remember what we talked about and hold your ground? When someone pushes your buttons tomorrow, Will you react from your wounds or respond from your sovereignty? Because honestly, the world is desperate for people who have done this work. Not more spiritual teachers or self-help gurus, but regular people who have integrated their shadows and learned to operate from authentic power. Every time you choose consciousness over conditioning, you're literally giving others permission to do the same. Your courage to be real makes it safer for others to be real. Your refusal to play small reminds others of their own buried greatness. This isn't just about fixing your life, though that'll happen. This is about being part of the solution to the consciousness crisis we're all living through. If what we've explored together today hit you in the gut, if you recognize yourself in Jung's insights and you're ready to stop giving your power away, stay connected with this work. Hit subscribe because I'm going to keep bringing you the real psychology behind transformation, not the watered-down spiritual bypassing you see everywhere else. Drop "Stay Sovereign" in the comments if you're serious about this path. Let me know you're not just here to consume content, but to actually embody what Jung discovered. And check out the Jung playlist if you want to go deeper into the shadow work and sovereignty practices. This is where the real transformation happens, in the daily application of these principles. Oh, and sign up for the weekly newsletter if you want me to send you the unfiltered insights that help you navigate this path. No fluff, no spiritual bypassing, just the real tools for psychological integration. Look, Jung spent his life figuring this out so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Your job now is to take what he discovered and make it yours. Your authenticity isn't just nice to have. It's essential for you, for your relationships, for everyone whose life you touch. Stop playing small. The world needs what you've got when you're operating from your integrated power. Everything starts with your choice to be completely yourself. Make that choice and watch everything else fall into place.